All right, so I wanted to do a recap on day one of backpacking up into the Talamanca range, the Cordillera Talamanca in Costa Rica. And we came up today and backpacked into the highland cloud forests. Um, and we crossed over the continental divide from the Pacific side to the Caribbean side and made it to our first base camp. And well, it'll be our base camp for the next couple of nights. And it was a very interesting day. This place is incredible. It's a temperate rainforest, and as you climb higher from the Pacific side, you come up to over 2,500 meters in elevation, so over 8,000 feet, and everything is just soaked. Tons of precipitation. There's moss and lichens and ferns covering everything. Life on top of life on top of life. Um, it would be similar to the Pacific Northwest up in Southeast Alaska or the coast of Washington State, something along those lines. But it's also got all kinds of other unique things that are completely different from that. The types of plants that are here, the types of animals that are here. On the way up, we came across two giant tapirs feeding in some large ferns along the edge of the trail, probably 40 meters away. And I'd never seen those in my life in the wild, so that was incredible. They just sat there and they let us hang out with them for about 20 or 30 minutes. So that was an experience of a lifetime. They were probably a mating pair based on the way they were interacting with one another. Initially, I thought it was a female and a baby, but as time went on, it seemed like they were both adult animals, and one of them was for sure a male, which we didn't know in the beginning. But after experiencing that, we kept hiking further up the trail. We started at around 1,500 meters of elevation and climbed higher and higher up into pristine highland cloud forest. And then we saw all kinds of different bird species, some of which I can't even identify. But we saw trogon, we saw a couple of quetzals with their long, beautiful blue and green plumage. That was really amazing. We saw a Central American quail, a whole group. We actually saw two separate groups of those, and those were really cool. I mean, I'm so used to the quail species we have in the U.S. I've come across bob whites and scaled quail, mountain quail, Gambel's quail. Never seen anything down native to Central America. So this is a native species down here. It's not found anywhere else. We also came across some different hummingbirds and a whole range of other things. We found a few frogs, the exact species I'm not sure about. Found some really interesting insects. Also couldn't identify them because there's so many different things here that I'm not accustomed to. We did come across a couple of plants that are important to know about. I'll post a separate video talking about stinging plants that grow in Costa Rica. They are native to this region, and you don't want to bump into those. That can cause some problems. Now, we kept climbing higher, and we made it to the Continental Divide, where it switches from the Pacific slope to the Caribbean slope. And that was over 2,500 meters of elevation. So we had already climbed 1,000 meters, roughly over 3,000 feet. And it just absolutely started pouring rain at that point. So we became soaked to the bone pretty much instantly. The temperatures up there were probably in the 50s, if I were to guess, in Fahrenheit. And it's definitely cold enough. If you're not moving around and you're not taking care of yourself, you can get hypothermia up there. And I did hear a story from my local guide about a woman that did die from hypothermia up in this area within the last couple of years. So if you don't have the right clothing and you don't take care of yourself up there on the trail, things can happen, and people can get turned around too. And if someone gets lost, then that's a serious risk. I was getting cold even when we would stop just to try and get water or have a snack, so we didn't stop very much. Now, I was also very dehydrated. I didn't do a great job of hydrating, which contributed to that. And so I would recommend doing a very good job of hydrating and eating snacks if you're going to backpack up into the cloud forest, because one, it's strenuous, but also the cold gets to you more than you realize up in here. It's just not what people are accustomed to when they think about Costa Rica. So definitely something to keep in mind. The other thing is it gets so slippery. There's a lot of clay in terms of the soil substrate, and we were slipping and sliding all over the place, climbing over huge fallen trees covered in moss. There's like whole sections where it was all swampy and just completely inundated with 3 to 8 inches of water in some places along the trail. So falling down is something that you should at least take seriously. Try and take your time over certain sections, because if you fall down up in here and you twist an ankle or break something, it's going to be extremely difficult to get you out. It's by the time we got all the way in here, it's over 8 miles in. It's a 14-kilometer push on day one into the first place. So 8 miles through all those same conditions, trying to get out with a broken ankle, it would be tough. You'd probably have to have a group carry you out, and someone would have to go out and get a group in here. So you'd be stuck in the rain and in the cold weather for a long time before someone could get to you. There's no cell service up in here either. So that's a whole other factor if something goes wrong. Now, I'm sharing this just for people's knowledge and staying safe, not because I think that you should be afraid to explore some of these places, but definitely take it serious. I was planning to camp up in here, and I was so happy to find out that we are staying at a cabin that they built on site way back in the national park here over 8 miles in. And the reason for that is once you get completely soaked to the bone, and there's no way to dry and get warm if you don't have a place like this to take off all your wet clothes and put on some dry clothes, cook up something, get some food in you, some new energy, try and make some hot chocolate or something like that. It would be really tougher than I imagined to try and camp. Now, you could do it probably with a really good rain fly, which was my plan, and a hammock. But trying to get that set up and stay dry while it was dumping rain, that would be really hard. And seriously, it would actually be dangerous in terms of hypothermia. So I would think twice about, unless you have really good gear and you're very accustomed to being in cold, temperate rainforest type environments like the Pacific Northwest, and then also camping, I would think twice about it, because it could be very dangerous. I mean, even staying in a tent on the ground, it's so inundated with water, you would be soaked to the bone, and your sleeping bag would be soaked, everything. So it would be very hard to do. Not impossible, but you would need the right stuff. I'm still considering doing that at some point for some research, but we would need to be prepared in advance. So I have no problem saying that we're staying in a wood cabin up here. It's not fancy, but it's really great for me. Like, this is luxury right now after all that. So other things to think about, you've got falls, potential hypothermia, but also snakes, right? There's a few different species of pit vipers that live up in the highlands. I made a separate video talking a little bit about those, so I won't go too much into it, but there's a few arboreal species that live up in here that you don't come across them often, and they're not as venomous as the terciopelos, the bothrops that live in the lowlands, or the bushmasters, the lachesis, that live in the lowlands. So that's good news, although a bite up here would be a really big deal. And again, trying to hike out when you're when you've got venom coursing through your veins and you're slipping and sliding and cold, it might be enough to kill you this far back, right? Now, Costa Rica's got anti-venom in pretty high supply as a country, which is very rare, and that's great news. And they have it even in a lot of small towns, but you would be a long hike out of here before you got to that anti-venom. So definitely something to think about. I would even try and bring it with me, probably if I was going to do research back up in here for longer periods, doing biodiversity survey work and things, just because that would be it. Now, I mean, you might survive, but it would be tough. Now, that being said, they're not crawling all over the place. We didn't even see any snakes on our hike in, and the guide says they don't see them that often. And he said it's not something that you should be majorly concerned about, but you should be careful and try not to step on things. Now, that being said, it's really hard to watch where you're stepping all the time because there's so much vegetation, pools of water everywhere. You're sliding, you're putting your hands on logs, you're stepping over logs, and they also are adapted for this, and they are very well camouflaged, right? So you just have to go a little bit slower when you can, but I definitely wouldn't be constantly worried and thinking about it either. Just try and be smart. Now, we also ended up crossing the Continental Divide right when the rainstorm opened up and there was a thunderstorm, and so I was a little bit concerned about lightning. We were in a very thick forest with a lot of tall trees. Luckily, we weren't under just one single tall tree in an open field, but you could still be in the wrong place at the wrong time with a lightning strike. We had a lot of thunder crashing. And also on the ridge itself, because lightning is attracted to the highest points, the Continental Divide itself was a bad place to be when that started. Which things happen, right? You try and plan the best you can, but when you go into these remote wilderness areas, it's tough to account for everything, right? You can't mitigate all risk back in here. Now, there are, just to be totally honest with people, on these trails coming up into the national park, first of all, you have to have a guide. And then also, if you time it right, this is not always happening, but they will send people up in here to try and help clear the main trail sometimes in advance of groups coming in. That's not a guaranteed thing, and it's also kind of like going up into the wilderness in the US. They have trail crews that do that and go up there and clean up those trails when they can, but it's not a guarantee that you're going to get perfect conditions. And with the rain and everything else, it's not an easy hike, okay? But I just want people to understand there is a little bit of trail work that does happen on some of these trail systems, even all the way back into here, which is over 8 miles in, right? So anything else that you might need to take into account? Insects. I haven't seen a ton of insects. I've seen some really cool ones, and especially lower in elevation on the Pacific side. There's not a ton way up in the cloud forest, although I'm sure we'll see some cool ones tonight. But we did cross through tens of thousands of ants that were climbing up the trail, and it looked like they were marching their way to some unknown random location. I have no idea, but the whole forest floor was moving. And if you stop in the middle of those things, they are climbing up your pants like that in a second. And there was, at one point, we had already passed through one group of ants. We were over 2,000 meters in elevation at that point. And we kept walking, and then we stopped because there was a little small green toucan species we were trying to see up in the trees. And we didn't even look at the ground because we were looking up in the trees. And before we knew it, we had ants climbing up our pants, and we were dancing around trying to shake them off before they could get to our skin. Luckily, I didn't really get any bites or anything from that, but it could have been a lot worse if we hadn't seen them in time, because they'll get all over your pack and everything. Now, unless you had hundreds of bites or thousands of bites, it probably wouldn't be like a medical emergency, but it could cause a lot of discomfort for you up on the trail. So you got to keep your eyes open for those. Now, the whole time, you're seeing incredible cloud forest, and everything is like, it's like sponges everywhere. All of the moss is just full of water, and you're listening to the rain, and you're listening to all these birds calling through the forest. I mean, it's beautiful and it's amazing. But I'm kind of just trying to break it down in terms of planning how to be safe, right? If you're going to go into these places. And then other than that, I think those are a lot of the biggest things to think about, and also just being in the best physical shape you can be in. A 14-kilometer push is a lot, and by the time you account for coming down the Caribbean side, which we came down another 500 meters from the Continental Divide, we would have covered over 4,500 feet elevation today, and over 8 miles, but probably well over 5,000 feet of elevation if you can include the ups and downs in between stretches, if not more. And it's physically, it's a serious push. I'm in pretty good shape. I haven't been hiking as much as I should be. Actually, in the last several months, I haven't been hiking at all, and it was a really tough hike for me. Very strenuous hike. Doable, and I'm okay, and we had what we needed to re-energize when we got here. But definitely don't underestimate how difficult it is physically to get back into this place. Now we're gonna go another 4 kilometers down tomorrow, and then 4 kilometers back up and stay at this base camp again tomorrow night. But as we go and make a deeper push down the Caribbean slope tomorrow, we'll go a little bit lower in elevation. The vegetation will probably change a little bit, although not dramatically. And we'll be walking along a river that's pouring out of the mountains, which is beautiful. I have been getting my water from the freshwater streams that are pouring out of the mountain here. And I have not been treating them, even though I have iodine tablets, because of what the guide has told me. He doesn't think it's a problem. That is a risk, right? I could end up with a very upset stomach here in the next couple of days. So I don't know if everybody wants to take that risk, but, and typically I don't, but on this occasion I have been. Other than that, just enjoy it, because this place is amazing and it's special. And if you look at Costa Rica, the Talamanca range is very much intact. There is a lot of primary forest across the entirety of the range. And if you go down far enough from the highlands on the Caribbean side, you make your way down into pristine primary lowland forest. And there's a ton of national parks down on the Caribbean side and the lowlands as well. But there is a limit in terms of how far you can really go. I think, unless you're doing an entire planned expedition, you you probably couldn't make it too much further than what we're about to do, which is 18 kilometers or 18 and a half kilometers one way, right? So it'll be at least a 36 kilometer round trip by the time this is all done. More than 10 miles each way, approximately. So yeah, it's a serious push, but I'm so glad that special places like this are still around, because a lot of the places are inundated with recreationists, and I know everybody loves our national parks, and they should enjoy them, but there's some places that need to be wild like this, and encompass this kind of wilderness, because there's not a lot of it left. The wildlife here is just kind of off the chain amazing. There's a lot of things we haven't seen, but there are jaguars up throughout this range. There are mountain lions, which they call pumas in Latin America. There's a whole range of other reptile and amphibian species. I mean, you've got endemic salamanders and frogs up in the highlands, and a whole range of bat species and other things. So this is a really amazing place. Yeah, I will post a couple of other clips so you can actually see more than just me talking. You can see some of the hiking and some of the other things that we saw along the way, including the tapirs and other wildlife, which is totally worth checking out. But yeah, and I might do a bag dump at some point if folks are interested, so you can see what I carried up into the cloud forest. Definitely something different, a different experience than your typical trip into Costa Rica.